Hey, we want to welcome everybody to another episode of You and the Law podcast show. We want to thank everybody for taking the time to tune in and join us for another hot topic on the most listened to law enforcement podcast show, where you get some informative information about what's going on with policing and the minority community. Uh, I am one of the co-hosts of the show, Chief Virgil Green, and the bearded gray dude sitting over there, all that is known all over podcast land, is now a retired police chief, but he still goes by the name of Chief Swaggy One. We need to, man, we got to have one of those, background claps where, you put the clapping in there, man, because you need some applause.
I don't need it.
You don't need it.
Reputation precedes me, so I'm good, man. You already
your rep precedes you got that strong of a rep. Well, everybody heard that Chief Swaggy One has got a rep behind him.
Yep.
Man, it must be nice, brother. To have a rep behind you.
Well, I think mine is pretty strong, pretty good one.
Yeah. So how you doing? Pretty good, brother. How you doing?
I got no complaints, man. I got no.
All right. Well, hey, man. Hopefully we get some people to tune in and join us on as we're streaming live on Facebook Live and LinkedIn Live as well. And you can also check us out on our YouTube channel, You and the Law Podcast Show, on our YouTube channel. So we're streaming live on all three of those platforms. And if you miss any parts of this broadcast that we're streaming live, our episodes are uploaded to Spotify, Anchor Podcasts, Google Podcasts. So wherever you listen to your podcast, that you can find You and the Law Podcast Show. And if you can't find us, send us a message in the chat room and let us know, and we'll make sure that we are on those platforms. But you definitely should be able to find us. So Keith, man, we've really grown over the last year or so, brother.
Yeah, I think so, man. I think we have some faithful listeners, and I think we have some really dynamic topics. And so I'm excited for what the future looks like for the podcast.
Yeah. Well, and man, and once again, I come up with another great topic to talk about.
What? Yeah, okay.
Well,
brother, that's what it takes, man. Go ahead. That's fine. What happened to
we? Hey, man. Well, I got to give credit where credit is due, because you came up with this topic for this week's podcast, and it is forcible transporting migrants. Is this a crime? And, Keith, this is something that's been in the news in Texas and Florida. And so we're going to talk about it to see if we can get some other people's opinion about it, and just have a deep conversation about how these migrants were treated who came from Venezuela that ended up in Florida, and how they ended up in Martha's Vineyard. And, Keith, researching for the show, brother, found some interesting information that back in the during the civil rights era, with the freedom bus riders, uh, politicians back in the early '60s did the same thing to blacks in Mississippi and sent them to Cape Cod, and it was all for political reasons. And so you sit there, you think of, here we are some, 50 plus years later, and you have politicians that are doing the same thing that they did back during the civil rights era.
Well, Virgil, doing some research on this topic, it's very clear that even in '62, when that occurred, and current day, a lot of this is political, has a political foundation. And it is, I'm a firm believer that there needs to be stronger immigration laws. But I also believe in the humanities part of it, the humanitarian part of it, the fact that people are human, and you don't just take people and use them as political pawns and for no reason. It's just that I don't like what you're sending them to a location where you don't like the political beliefs of a city leader or a state's leader. So you take individuals, you use them as a pawn, and you send them to a city to prove a point.
Yeah.
What's the point you're trying to prove? And I think that it is a shame that people are being utilized and put in this position. I think that there are those who don't understand that there's, what an immigrant is, what a migrant is, what a refugee is. And Virgil, if you remember, in 2005, I believe, 2005, whenever Hurricane Katrina.
2005. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you remember that you had a lot of a large number of citizens that were being transported by busloads to
various cities
throughout the nation because
Mhm.
of the damage that was done to New Orleans. And I remember listening to a radio station because there was some media personnel that were referring to the New Orleans residents as refugees.
Yeah, you remember that. Yeah.
And someone had to clarify that really quickly that they were evacuees. A refugee is someone who's being forced out based on political beliefs or war or something like that. These were law-abiding citizens, taxpayers who live, New Orleans residents who had lifelong residents, needed to be temporarily relocated, but they were called refugees. And so that didn't sit well with me back then, and then it definitely doesn't sit well with me now, Virgil, when you see that planes and I think I sent you something this morning about what these plane and bus rides are costing the taxpayers from Texas and from Florida. One as much as $21,000 per person to ride a plane, and the other is about $2,000 per person to be transported by bus. And from what we gather, some of the individuals, the migrant population that we're speaking of, we're being told, hey, we're going to get you jobs. We're being told the truth. They're right in the middle. They don't understand. Thank goodness in Martha's Vineyards and the other DC, these individuals are being welcomed. As a matter of fact, being provided basic needs, and in some form jobs are being welcomed. They're not, and so thank goodness that, for that. But, there are some states, California's one, and I think there's another state, maybe Florida, that they're looking into this to see if this was a kidnapping, if these were crimes, even federal laws, because some of these individuals were forcibly relocated.
Yeah. Well, Keith, I think, going back to what you just touched on, using or labeling people as, refugees or migrants. And I think when I look back at what you just brought up about what took place with Hurricane Katrina in 2005, where it impacted, over 80% African Americans, and they were displaced. They were sent to Houston. They were sent to Oklahoma. They were sent to various other parts of Texas, outside of Texas, outside of New Orleans, and to hear people to refer to minorities as, oh, now they're refugees, and then you look at the presidential administration then, which was under, what was it, George Bush II, and how all of that took place and how it was mismanaged from day one, and how it impacted people. And I've got to ask this question, Keith, and to those who are listening, we haven't seen this same type of rhetoric when people who have been displaced in Ukraine or other countries, that they've been welcomed to the United States. You had all these various organizations who have welcomed them, made sure that people had, housing, made sure people had the necessities that they needed. They have received that. But when it comes to minorities, it is, well, they're coming from south of the border, so we don't want them in the United States. Do you see the difference in how people, if you're from South America or, from the South, you are unwelcome, but if you are from, and the things that's going on in Ukraine is horrible. But even there's Syria. You've had people from Syria that have been welcomed into the United States with open arms. So I don't know if other people see the difference in how different groups of people are treated in situations where, people from Venezuela are trying to get away from everything that's going on in that country. So how is that any different what's going on in Syria?
I think, Virgil, is that more people have been are in tune now than we think regarding what you just said. I think that is why Gavin Newsom and others have said we've got to look at this. I mean, we've never forced people out of a city to other cities just because. Well, one of those things where it's like, if you really think about it, man, it goes back to was it the 40s and 50s in the Japanese camps,
concentration camps,
where they was set up in California.
Yeah,
where Japanese citizens were forced to stay in pretty much concentration camps. And then you look back a few years ago when the border crisis was really a hot topic, and you had deplorable conditions that babies and things and families were separated. So I don't think people have forgotten about that. And then we talked about 1962 and how people were forced to get back on buses or forced on buses and shipped to locations that that's not where they were initial destination was. And so it comes down to like I said, a lack of dehumanization, a lack of respect, and a political background, political platform to say that this is what my plans are. We have an immigration problem in this country, and I'm going to fix it. I mean, that's what the platform of several leading politicians are, especially leading up into the 2024 elections. Everybody knows, Virgil, what this is about.
Yeah.
Nobody's you can't fool anybody. But
you're right.
And that's the thing. I think people try to, well, we're doing this for the betterment of the country. Man, listen, this is a country, the United States is a country that people come to for safety, to grow, to raise their families, to start businesses. This is nothing new. The immigration discussion is nothing new. I'll say this again. I do believe that there needs to be some improvements in the immigration process. Totally believe that. But I'm also a big person who believes in not dehumanizing people and treating people with respect and not trying to make a statement by someone else's somebody else being embarrassed or humiliated. And so I think, but when you really think about it, I don't think a lot of people realize the difference between a migrant and an immigrant. And Virgil, the two, an immigrant is someone who makes a conscious decision to leave his or her home from a foreign country with the intention of settling into a new country. And there's a vetting process. So there's a vetting process for any immigrant that comes into the United States or to that new country. And then there are many of these individuals become lawful permanent residents and eventually citizens. That's the part that's not told. They talk about individuals coming over and not being here legally, but there's a process. There are more individuals that go through the proper process to become citizens of the country than we're led to believe.
Yeah.
And also immigrants research. They have a higher tendency to research their destination, explore employment opportunities, and study the language of the country where they plan to live. Most importantly, they are free to return home whenever they chose. And when you start talking about a migrant is someone who is more fluent, who's moving from place to place within his or her country or across the border, usually for economic reasons such as seasonal work. Similar to immigrants, they were not forced to leave their native countries because of the persecution of violence, but rather to seek better opportunities. Many of those crossing the U.S. border from Central American countries, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, are in fact asylum seekers, not immigrants. They have a well-founded fear of persecution if they return home.
Yeah.
So that's the difference between the two, and I don't think a lot of people understand, the difference because it's not actually explained what the difference is.
Yeah. Well, Keith, you stated this earlier that we all know what this is about. This is for political reasons. When you have a Texas governor and a Florida governor who say, hey, we're sending them or shipping them to sanctuary cities who are more than welcoming these individuals. Well, you're going about it for political gain because you're sending them to New York. That's a Democratic mayor. You're sending them to DC where there's a Democratic mayor. So all these cities that Abbott and the governor of Florida are sending these people to are cities that they can get a lot of media coverage out of it. And so you got people, you're playing with people's lives when you say, we're going to send you somewhere where you can get, we're going to promise you jobs. Well, then you turn around, Keith, and you look and you see how, when you just mentioned the word migrants, you have people from Mexico, further south into Mexico, who come up and work in Florida. They work in Texas doing whatever season it may be. But you don't have a problem with that, but you have a problem when it benefits you to make a statement because we're in a political season. And it's wrong. And I think a lot of people see that. And I've got a video that I'm going to share with the listeners about the Texas sheriff who has done something that a lot of sheriffs probably would not do, is open it up a criminal investigation to see if the Texas governor and the Florida governor can be held, if there's any criminal charges that can be brought against them. And the one thing that these governors have is they have the law behind them, and they have their attorney generals who are going to make sure that nothing like that moves forward, Keith. So
Yeah,
once again,
Virgil, let me say this. I get what you're saying, but anytime you take someone across state lines,
it's a crime.
It could even be a federal crime. So
Yeah,
I get what you're saying, statewide maybe, but are there some federal laws that may have been broken? So this is going to be interesting. Yeah. The next few months are going to be really interesting to see what the outcome is.
Yeah. Hey, Keith. Keith, I'm going to play this news clip for our listeners. To put in context, this is regarding the Texas sheriff who is opening up a criminal investigation.
This is News Channel 8 at 11 on your side.
And now at 11, the legal battle over Venezuelan immigrants continues. Why one Texas sheriff says Florida officials are playing with human lives. Good evening. I'm Stacey Scheibel.
And I'm Keith. Kate, thank you for joining us tonight. Democrats continue to take on Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and his decision to fly migrants to Martha's Vineyard. Democratic California Governor Gavin Newsom recently called for a DOJ investigation, and today, Sheriff Javier Salazar, a Texas Democrat, announced that he's launching his own investigation.
The Bexar County Sheriff says the migrants were exploited and left to fend for themselves after being dropped off halfway across the country. Justin Shecker joins us. He is live in Tampa tonight with more on what the sheriff had to say and the response from the governor's office. Justin?
Hey, Stacey and Keith, good evening to you both. This is the first confirmed investigation since the controversial migrant flights made national headlines last week. That sheriff has directed his organized crime division to investigate whether someone broke the law.
What infuriates me the most about this case.
The Bexar County Sheriff in Texas wants to know whether the 48 migrants flown by the state of Florida from Texas to the Panhandle to Martha's Vineyard were the victims of a crime.
I believe people need to be held accountable for it to the extent possible. At this point, I'm not able to definitively say here's the statute that they broke, either federal, state, or local. But what I can tell you is it's wrong. Just from a human rights perspective, what was done to these folks is wrong.
The communications director for Governor Ron DeSantis fired back on Twitter saying, Florida provided an opportunity in a sanctuary state with resources, as expected, unlike the 53 who died in an abandoned truck in Bexar County in June. Sheriff Javier Salazar says someone paid a Venezuelan migrant to recruit 50 others from a migrant resource center in San Antonio.
But look, they've already had a rough life. They've already suffered enough.
Attorneys from Boston representing more than 30 of the migrants say their clients received this brochure about Massachusetts cash assistance, housing, and job opportunities. The brochure is meant for refugees.
They have every right to be where they are. And I believe that they were preyed upon. Somebody came from out of state, preyed upon these people, lured them with promises of a better life.
Governor DeSantis denies allegations that the migrants were misled about their destination.
Not only do they give them a release form to sign, they actually give them a packet, and in that packet included a map of Martha's Vineyard.
While the governor promises more flights and buses using state funding to highlight illegal immigration, the Bexar County Sheriff says the first flights are under criminal investigation.
It's an abuse of human rights, but I would like to find out sooner rather than later what charges, if any, are going to apply and to whom.
And Florida House Democrats are accusing the governor of misusing taxpayer dollars set aside for the immigration relocation program. They say he exceeded the authority granted by lawmakers and are asking Republican leaders to cut off the funding. We are live tonight in Tampa. I'm Justin Shecker, 8 on your side.
Hey, Keith, and the sheriff in Texas made a point about how these individuals were treated. And I'm not going to use the word migrant. They're individual, they're people. And so they were misguided, they were misled. And the fact that you've got Republicans are making this like, well, it's their fault. and you got to ask yourself, where is the humanity side of it when you treat people this way? But I go back to the statement I made earlier, where if these were individuals who were fleeing the war going on in Ukraine or fleeing the war going on in Syria, you would welcome them to Florida. You would welcome them to Texas, because there's no political gain in it. But now you're trying to attack this administration because of the immigration policies. And so there's blame on both sides when it comes to immigration. But you don't use people as political messages.
Yeah, but it's and we talk about this, man. I try not to look at this as a political or Republican or Democratic issue. I look at it as a humanity, an issue about humanity. I've said that before. This country has always had individuals from other countries who have come here, whether they're voluntary or involuntary. I mean, if you just really want to get down to the truth, how were we brought over here, Virgil? How were our forefathers brought over here? And so, it comes down to the fact the country has had for hundreds of years people coming into this country. And if it had not been for individuals who had come here, the successes that this country has had has been on the backs of individuals who were either forced to come here or chose to come here to live, to make lives better for themselves. But when you in 2022, when you play this ping pong game, Democrat, Republican, Democrat, I'm going to show the country that I'm going to be this starch supporter of firmer immigration laws. So I'm going to take advantage of these individuals who have come here for a better life, and I'm going to send them somewhere where they can be babied, and I'm going to get them out of Florida, because it's what I told people I was going to do. No humanity in it at all. It's all about it's all about show. It's all about what can we do to make ourselves look better in the upcoming election. And I truly believe, just like there are people that are paid and there's solicitation that goes on every time there's a major incident that occurs in the United States, where people are hired to go to different cities, and they are hired and they're put on payrolls to cause problems. You see some of the same individuals. Do I believe that someone provided documentation to these individuals, saying that, this is what's waiting for you in Martha's Vineyard? Absolutely. Do I believe the people in Martha's Vineyard were aware that this was going to happen? Absolutely not. I think that this was an S show. You know what I mean when I say S?
Yeah.
This was a point of political stand that is going to affect so many different people, and these people were forcibly transported against their will to cities that are led by large Democratic leadership. And like I said, it's not a Republican or Democratic thing; it's a civil rights thing. And I don't blame the sheriff for doing it. He feels like and then, to sit here and DeSantis's spokesperson, to sit here and throw up the 53 individuals who tragically died in that truck earlier this year. What does that have to do with anything? That doesn't have anything. Yeah, very insensitive. That doesn't have anything to do with that. That has nothing to do with that sheriff. That nothing to do with that sheriff at all. But you're going to open every container you have to try to make this man look bad, and then you're going to do it at the expense of individuals who died tragically in the back of a truck. So I'm glad they're opening up a criminal investigation. I think they should. Will anything come of it? We don't know. But I will say I'm very impressed with the leaders of New York, the leaders of DC, and the leadership in the Martha's Vineyard area for being very receptive and providing resources to these people who were brought, who were forced or forcibly transported to these locations, and they were very receptive, and hopefully this can be the beginning of a new life for these individuals. But in Texas, man, they've already spent $12 million on this deal. $12 million.
Transporting. Well, and Keith, and that was something I was going to bring up, because in the news clip that we just watched, where the Democrats in Florida are looking into the funds that were appropriated for immigration has been used in a way that it wasn't intended to be used. And so there again, and I think, how do you arbitrarily as a governor decide, well, the legislators have allocated this money for one procedure or one thing related to immigration, but I'm going to turn around and use this money to put people on buses and put people on these private planes. And again, Keith, these were private planes. These were not commercial flights. So you got to realize now how much that these private planes cost taxpayers in Florida. But that's a part of the conversation that people are not really talking a lot about, because look at the money that this governor in Florida and the governor in Texas has spent to send people to states for political reasons. Now they can say, well, they were greeted by family members, or they're on to a better life. But Keith, I'm gonna go back to when you come into this country and you're in the state of Texas or the state of Florida, you got to go through the immigration process to leave that state. So this is a question. I don't know if we got any lawyers that are listening or people who are very familiar with immigration, but you just can't put people on buses and planes and send them to another state when they haven't went through the federal process with immigration to leave that state.
That's going to be that's going to be the question. Had these individuals gone through the proper process that we read earlier regarding immigration, regarding immigration, had they gone through the process, or were they? The question is going to be: were they individuals who had come across the border and had not gone through that process, and then were they then transported to these cities throughout the nation? Now, what I find interesting and what I'm going to be paying close attention to in the very near future, if you remember, not too long ago, during a presidential campaign, it was brought up that individuals who were coming into this country from Venezuela, El Salvador, and other countries, if you remember, somebody said that they were some of the most violent people in the world. You remember that?
I do. They were rapists,
murderers. Okay, so now you take individuals who are so-called perceived, nothing proven, not been vetted or anything. And now you put these individuals on a plane or a bus and you send them to cities throughout the nation. It's going to be interesting to see how you do that. But then a few years later, a few years previously, you were saying the individuals who enter the country in this format are some of the most violent individuals in the country. So it's going to be interesting. You can't have it both ways. And like I said, by no means, we don't know anything about these individuals. I give everybody a fair chance, but it's going to be really interesting to see because DeSantis and Abbott were two of the individuals that joined in that conversation that said we are tracking some of the most violent individuals that cross our borders from Venezuela, Honduras, El Salvador. But it's going to be interesting, like I said, to see if these individuals went through the screening process.
Mm-hmm.
Individuals did not go through the screening process. Now you're seeing individuals that you have made very clear that have criminal histories to other countries, which I don't believe that's true. I don't think you categorize people like that. That's profiling. But it's going to be interesting to see because that question is going to come up. I guarantee you at some point during the election process, campaign process, that's going to come up because that was said so many times during the last presidential campaign that those countries that we just mentioned and the country that these individuals are coming from were violent. These individuals were violent. So it's going to be interesting to see. Yeah. So you allow, if that's the case, you allow people who have not been screened properly, you put them on planes and buses and you send them off not knowing anything about them. So you can't have it both ways.
No, you can't. Well, Keith, and just going back to what took place in the last presidential election or before that, where you had Trump calling out, just really degrading people from, south of the border. And the fact that here's a man who had probably over 70% of his staff were Latinos, but he didn't have a problem with them working at his golf courses or at Mar-a-Lago and all these other properties. But here you are calling out people who are trying to flee a country where there is violence going on, there's murders going on, but hey, they can work at my golf course. That's great. But it benefits you.
Which the law allows people to do when they come from countries of violence and civil war and things like that. So it appears that Virgil, it's a topic that people will debate you about. I think people have a right to their own opinion. As I always preface it by saying we don't make this a Republican or Democratic issue. We make it a humanitarian issue.
Yes, sir.
But my question is, how can you support a platform that says this, but then you turn around and do something that's totally opposite of what you're saying? You're letting so-called, as you say, people who have violent past to come into this country, and now you're sending them to different areas of the country. But it goes back to it's a double standard. It's a double standard for some. And I would really like to sit down face to face. I'd like to have one or both of those individuals on the podcast. We are inviting Governor DeSantis and Governor Abbott to be guests on our podcast, because I would like to know what's the difference. What changed their mind from 2020 to 2020? What changed their mind?
Yeah, to 2022. Yeah.
Just,
if we can get those two on, but I man, I think if we could get Beto O'Rourke on, who is running against Abbott for Texas governor, who, I have listened to this guy speak in Spanish and English to people that the current governor is not on the same level with. And so to hear his perspective about what's going on in a state that he lives in El Paso. So he is surrounded by, El Paso, you got Juarez, and which everybody, if you don't know about that part of Texas, Juarez is just as bad as when you get into Mexico when it comes to the drug cartel and people trying to come across the border into the United States through El Paso and through through other small towns along the United States-Mexico border. If we could swing that, T-Swag, man, we're moving on up in podcasts. So, but
I mean, Virgil, when you think about it, you're up in a hub that's got a large Somalian population of individuals who have been refugees and immigrants and migrants. That's what this country is. I mean, this country is made up of those individuals. We are a melting pot. And I've said this before. There's no such thing as our country. I mean, this is my country. Man, it's our country. The way I look at it. Now, there are people that do not believe that, but if you're gonna bring us here and expect us to make a living and obey the rules, then it's our country.
Yeah.
And so everybody doesn't feel the same way that 48 or 48 other people who are governors or those who are governors. Not everybody feels that way. Not everybody feels the way we do, but at the end of the day, where is the humanity part of it? Where is the humanity part of it? And see, now what you start thinking of now, man, is, well, man, what now? Does this mean that we're gonna, that people who are homeless are gonna be bussed out and put on planes and shipped to other parts of the country because you have mayors and other local politicians who don't want those individuals, our homeless community in those cities? They're going to move in other cities. I mean, it kind of gets you to thinking, man, what's next? Who else is going to be forcibly moved to other states and other cities?
Well, Keith, it just goes back to what I made a comment earlier, that the things that are happening to people from Venezuela, Honduras, El Salvador, all these countries that are south of the United States, and even parts of other parts of Mexico. The same thing isn't happening to people fleeing Ukraine or fleeing. Now you got people fleeing Russia. And so, Keith, I remember there was something took place last year where you had people from, I don't know, I want to say Syria, who came up south of the border. And I tried how did people from that part of the country, of the world, get to this part of the country to come up through the southern borders? And as you just mentioned, up in Minnesota, where I am now, there's a large population of people from Somalia.
The largest in the nation, along the Canadian border, and yeah, absolutely.
And I didn't realize that, just a couple of months that I've been up here, is that there is the city of Minneapolis has a large population of Somalians. They have a large population of people from Liberia. You've got people from India. You got all these people, different demographics of people in the state of Minnesota, and the state of Minnesota has welcomed them to this state. And other parts of I'm pretty sure you got, Wisconsin borders Minnesota. And so you haven't heard of people who come to the northern part of the United States being treated like how they're being treated in the southern part of the United States.
Well, Virgil, I think the thing that's unnerving to many people is the fact that you're being told that I'm going to send you to these specific areas. Not saying that we're going to talk to the governors, we're going to talk to the mayors, and we're going to try to find the best fit for individuals so that they can,
they can have a productive life.
Yeah. No, you're picking certain cities that you have a dislike for those leaders of that state or that city, and you're sending these individuals. It's sort of like, okay, go stay with, I can't do anything with this child, so I'm gonna send this child to another relative to deal with it. That's what it's like. Not sitting down having a conversation and laying out the the facts of this is what we think. What do you think? This is what we think might work well. Did you get the consulates involved? Did you get the consulates from those different countries? Did you get them involved? I mean, those are questions that, coming from Little Rock, where you had a Mexican consulate, and meeting with them on a regular basis, my question was, were they ever informed? Were the presidents of those countries informed? But you put people on planes and buses, and you'd have press conferences, and it's like it's a celebratory press conference, basically like, well, I'm going to show you. We're going to send them where you're saying that you're a sanctuary city. You're saying that you welcome people who are here illegally. We're going to send them to you, and you deal with it. Now, to me, that is probably one of the most dehumanizing. You're using people as objects. You're not taking it. I'm pretty sure. I guarantee you. I don't know this for a fact, but let me just say this. I would be interested to find out if there were any children involved.
There were, and that was one of the things that the Texas sheriff brought out, and there's been some other news reports that there were kids that were a part of this with their families who were put on these planes and buses and sent to these other states. So, and I think one of the things that, by showing that news clip of the Texas sheriff who his department has opened up a criminal investigation key, it's good to see a sheriff not get in the middle of the politics, even though this is a Democratic sheriff, elected sheriff. He is looking at the law. Did these individuals break the law by transporting these individuals across state lines, many state lines? And so for him to do that says a lot about what type of individual this person is. The fact that he's going to take some heat, because a lot of people are going to say, hey, the governors are governors. They know the law. But Keith, this wasn't about the law. This was about, hey, I'm going to make the Biden administration look bad, and I'm going to make a statement.
I'm going to make a statement.
Yeah, and here you are. You're sending people. When you send people to where the vice president is staying at, that right, she lives on a military base.
Well, also keep in mind you have the former president Obama there. Lives in Martha. Yeah, he has a home, and he has a home there. Yeah, the Kennedys have home. You have a lot of prominent people, black, white, Hispanic, Asian. So you have a lot of prominent people who live in that area. It's a vacationing, for the most part. People have vacation.
It's a vacation resort. Yeah.
And so basically, we're gonna send, we're gonna dump people there. I mean, that's what the actions say. Whether that's what you meant, no matter what, but that's what your actions portray that. Yeah.
Well, Keith, and we brought this up earlier in the podcast, and for those who are just now tuning into the podcast, tonight's topic is forcible transporting migrants. Is this a crime? And as many know, the Texas, the sheriff in Texas has opened up a criminal investigation that involves the mayor, the governor of Texas, and the governor of Florida. And Keith, I got something I saw earlier with the governor from Florida. The hurricanes have just devastated parts of Florida, and you have this guy who stands up and continues to make this about political issues. People lost their homes, people lost their jobs, people, their lives will never be the same. But you have this man bringing up the fact that people, the news media is going to certain parts of Florida and they're trying to make a story which is not a story into a story. You know, you go back and you see all of the things that we've dealt with this past year, and then you've got this Bannon guy who is on trial for uh, misleading people to build a wall on the Mexico United States border. And you got to ask yourself, you know, when does this type of rhetoric stop, Keith? And you don't see that there's an end to it, because people, if they're in power and they feel that they are privileged, they're going to continue to do the things that they're doing. And it's the people, other people are going to suffer from those actions.
It's all about the spotlight, man. It's you know, I mean, there's long-term solution. I mean, there's solutions to the immigration problem. You're not gonna solve it overnight. We didn't get into this mess overnight, so we're not gonna solve it overnight. But there's a way to do it, and it goes back to the humanitarian way. Do you treat someone different because they speak a different language, they look a different way, because they're not from the United States? Absolutely not. And I think that's the main thing people are looking at. You're treating these people differently. And you mentioned that earlier. You have individuals from Russia, Ukraine coming, being received, and without any, there's no one saying we're going to ship you to Martha's Vineyard, or we're going to ship you to DC, wherever you're coming to welcoming centers, and that's good. That's the way it should be. You just don't forcibly put people in, and he can say whatever he wants to. They signed waivers. Now, let me ask you this, man. Do you think, realistically, that, and you can say that you've got people translating what these waivers are saying, you can say people signed them, but in the heat of passion, a moment of passion, when people are trying to get somewhere and do something and they have no knowledge of the laws of the country, all they know is they're trying to get away from where they are to hopefully make a better life for themselves. Do you not think that people, do you really think people read that thoroughly, those forms? And then you say you gave them directions, but you gave them a map of Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah,
it would be interesting to see if there were any resources on those maps, contact numbers. Did they have any physicians? It'd be interesting to see what they categorize as resources for the individuals that were forcibly taken to these different areas of the nation.
Yeah. Hey, Keith, we got a question from Pamela Humphrey, who says, is this equivalent to human trafficking?
I think you'll have some people say yes, but the thing about human trafficking is normally that is done to commit a crime, to make money. That is normally done for profit. Now, could this have been done for profit? Could you say that the profit that those two governors were looking for, political profit as far as votes and being in higher offices? I guess you could say it is pseudo trafficking. But as far as the law, I don't think the law is going to get to the point of saying that these individuals were trafficked. I think what the law could say is that these individuals possibly were kidnapped. But trafficking is going to be basically, you're going to have to say that these individuals were taken and forced to do something against their will and for profit.
Yeah, and I don't think we haven't seen any profit there.
And Mike Norris answered the question. No, it's not. There'll be some that will prepare it, but absolutely not.
Yeah. Well, also, Mike Norris has a comment. He says that the sheriff has no jurisdiction to investigate DeSantis. He is grandstanding. He said he has friends who live in Martha's Vineyard, and they all thought it was funny as hell that illegals were dropped there. The limousine liberals who did not mind southern Texas being invaded were can't read that part to see them on their doorsteps. You know,
We're aghast to see them on their doorsteps.
yeah. I don't. The part where you state that the sheriff has no jurisdiction to investigate DeSantis. I don't think he's not grandstanding. He's not getting anything out of it. I think one of the things that Chief Humphrey mentioned. This is the humanitarian side of it. What's right and what's wrong. And I think at the end of the day, you got to stand for what's right and what's wrong. And if there was crimes committed, people need to be held accountable. Nobody is above the law. But if there wasn't any crimes committed, then you move on down the road. But there again, I think these are the decisions that have to be made without anything related to politics. Tony Hollis, he says, "Man, I'm sorry that he's tuning in late, but no problem, Mr. Hollis. We know you're a faithful listener to the podcast show. We definitely thank you and everybody else for tuning in." And
let me say this, Virgil.
We got about 1 minute.
Yeah, I want to say this. I want to respond to Mr. Norris. It's not about grandstanding. It's not about jurisdiction. It's about bringing awareness to what's actually going on. I don't care, liberal, conservative. I've said that before. I don't care what you are. But the fact of the matter is, when you use people to your benefit, a person's, your benefit, a person's safety or whatever to your benefit, to benefit you, then there's a problem there, and man, we got to take these liberal and conservative hats off. And it comes down to, if you believe that it's a humanitarian effort to just send people from, they think they're going one place and you just send them somewhere else for no reason, just only to prove a point, then okay, you got to live with that. But I can tell you right now, I don't think that's right. I do believe there's some repair that needs to be done to the immigration system. I've always said that, but you don't do that. Why not send those individuals to other places? So,
there again, you get into the politics side of it. Mike Norris says the government has already shipped hundreds of thousands of illegals across the country, and nobody really paid any attention. The current government has been doing it for a very long period of time. I don't know what administration or what government has shipped people.
Nobody's grandstanding like DeSantis and Abbott.
No.
They're grandstanding. They're not doing it for the right reason. They're doing it to make a point and for votes.
Yeah.
So,
Keith, I go back to.
He can say all he wants to. We're not talking. Yeah, people are shipped every day. Absolutely, 1,000% so. But you don't hear people grandstanding about it.
Yeah, correct.
Immigration's only been grandstanded in the last 3 or 4 years.
Well, and again, just like I made the comment about people from Ukraine and other parts of the country who are being they're being welcomed here to the United States, and you don't hear anybody saying anything about that. But there's this conversation that surrounds people from south of the border. People south of the border, Keith, and to the listener, they're no different than people from Ukraine, people from Russia, people from Syria, people from Pakistan, or wherever they're from. They're no different. But it's a political season, and we got people who want to grandstand, as you said, to try to prove a point about getting votes. That's what it's about.
Let's get Mike Norris on the show one day.
Yeah, we do. Hey, brother, man, it's been another great podcast, man, and I want everybody to make sure you tune in next week to another episode of You and the Law Podcast Show. Want to thank everybody for tuning in and listening tonight.
All right, good night, everybody.